Deep dive interviews with music gear inventors, builders, creators, and tone chasers. The Gear Gab Podcast with Eric Dahl uncovers the behind-the-scenes stories of the music gear that inspires us. And now, here's your host, Eric Dahl.
For a number of years in the amplifier world, and we became friends at I think one of the guitar shows. I'm not sure which one, Dave, but he is the owner and the man behind these amplifiers. I've got Edwards Amplifications, Dave Edwards, talking with us about your great amps. And we were talking, Dave, before we started going on this. I want you to talk about your background, but you know, the vision of what your amps were going to be when you launched the company, and then now, but also seeing how far you've progressed, like the recent Amigos show. You've come a long way, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about between your amplifiers and your pedal and everything else. So it's great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been quite a journey since we met.
Especially those first early amplifiers. Yeah. Oh, totally. But it's a lot of positive progress. I want you to tell the audience, Dave, when we first start off, about, you know, once again, you started out as a drummer. I'm not going to hold that against you. Praise team drummer for over 35 years with church and everything, but also on what your journey was with amplification to be able to study on this and do what you do to make custom amplifiers. How did you get into this?
Well, so I guess you should know that from a very young age, I like to work on things. I was a tinkerer. I took things apart and saw how they worked and put them back together, which absolutely mortified my mother and father at first because I was doing this as like, you know, at 5 years old.
Right.
And the understanding of it was, I don't know, you know, it was just God given, I guess, because I have no idea why I was so interested in it, but it just consumed me. And, you know, I've always been interested in electrical devices and mechanical stuff. I've tinkered with just about everything, just kind of a Renaissance guy, I guess.
Yeah.
But, you know, we grow up fixing things because you had to. But that being said, I started playing drums. I had at a young age. Got my first drum set when I was 11, and
Wow.
it was because my mom and dad, they were loving, very, very supportive parents. But my dad was actually Hank Williams Jr.'s dentist, and we lived
right there. Just your dad was Hank Williams Jr.'s dentist. I mean, right there. I mean, you know, but also, you know, and we were talking, Dave, and once again, knowing each other as long as we have, to where you didn't come from a musical family, but they were very supportive of what you were doing, playing music, and with all of your, you know, drive to do something unique in the music gear world. So right there. I mean, you know, but also in the town you were raised, there wasn't a lot to teach you or people to work with you to teach you what you're doing with these custom amplifiers.
No, not at all. I'm one of these people that's self-taught. You learn by making mistakes, sometimes really bad ones. But that being said, you learn, and that's how I learn. And I'm always learning. And that's the thing about what I do now. I'm always learning. If you think you know everything there is to know about what you're doing, you're dying. And
you got to tell us, where did you go to school for this also? Because I know that you had to find another area to get an education on what you were wanting to do with amplification and all that.
Well, so I went to audio engineering school in South Florida back before audio engineering schools were a thing.
Right.
Because I had this band that I was in, a really good band back in the 80s. We all had long hair. And
didn't we? That
ended up not working out, and I had to figure out what I was going to do, and get myself, you know, out of trouble and make something of myself. So I decided to go down there, and it ended up being the reason I went was the master audio professor was Ed Mashal that recorded the Eagles albums, had Grammy Awards sitting on his desk, and Ed took a lot of interest in me because I wanted to learn. He saw the fact that I was passionate about it, and it made him passionate to teach me. And so that being said, the school had phenomenal facilities, and he was just a wealth of knowledge. And I was already working on electrical stuff because of the band I was in. Those guys could play guitar, but they could not fix anything. So anytime something broke, I was the guy that had to fix it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very important knowledge to have, as we both know. When you're out on the road and you're at shows, and cables break, amps break, PA systems, microphones, you name it, and it can end a show. And and then you're scrambling to try and find a music store open or something, or back in the day for you and I, Radio Shack. I remember going with my dad because he was kind of that ilk also, building the Heathkit amplifiers and speakers back in the 60s, and you'd have to go to Radio Shack to find the parts. It's like going, well, instead of just buying a guitar cable, my dad would solder them. And so he'd get like a spool of cable and just make our cables. Right.
Yeah, it's kind of how it all starts, and it's a slippery slope.
And you started out, before you started Edwards Amplification also, Dave, you started out doing a lot more repair, because I remember even back in the day when you started, people knew you as an amplifier repair guy.
Right. And it totally started organically, and it was local. And those guys, hey, can you take a look at this for me? Hey, can you take a look at this for me? And I'm like, yeah, I'll look at it. Why not? What have I got to lose?
Well, and that had to be a great knowledge base, because I remember your early amplifiers too, Dave, to where, they were, it was almost like other amp companies over the years, to where you were kind of doing souped up versions of the old ones, and certainly your knowledge of tubes and transformers and the circuitry and all that. But I think that you had to have gained a lot of knowledge, Dave, from doing the repairs before you launched your own
education.
Right.
Totally education. I tell people that I went back to school when I started doing this. I went back to school, and it was totally an education. It's like a master's degree from Hard Knocks.
Right.
But that being said,
and especially when you're working on some of those old vintage amplifiers, I mean, with the lacquered transformers, and as you and I know, some of the tubes are hit and miss, and the preamp tubes, and I mean, it's like, I always remember to where it's like, and once again, you and I both, being out playing with vintage amplifiers, and it's like, and you have to tap the tubes to see if one of them is microphonic.
Mm-hmm. Still do that.
Yeah.
Still do that.
So what year did you decide then that it was time to start your own brand of amplifiers that is what it is today?
So that's kind of a funny story. So it was probably 2007, 2008, and I'd already been working on stuff and doing stuff. I decided that I was going to delve more into guitar, because I grew up with all of the classic rock albums, like all of the classic country albums, all of the blues, Motown, the whole 9 yards, right?
And also a mix of Kiss and Ace Frehley in there too.
Oh yeah, no, I was a massive Kiss fan in school. A massive Kiss fan when I was in elementary school, face paint and all. But that being said, I came home when I was probably 5 or 6, and Kiss was really controversial on the news, and the news was on, and all of a sudden pops up Ace Frehley doing this guitar solo with smoke coming out of a guitar on television. And I looked at my dad with stars in my eyes and said, "That's what I want to do." And he says, "Oh no, you're not." But fast forward, I'd played drums for a lot of years, and just that and the audio engineering thing, I just stayed in my own lane in the repairs, and guitars were just a tool for repairing stuff. But I decided I wanted to figure out why these sounds came from certain circuits because of those albums. You listen to those albums growing up. I mean, I grew up an hour and 20 minutes from Muscle Shoals.
Oh my gosh. So the Fame Studios and everything.
Yeah. Oh. And so all of that stuff was just highly influenced me. And I literally would lay down at night and hear it in my head, like whatever album I was listening to was like on my mind, and I'm like just gravitated and was enamored with those sounds. So I decided, and I was buying stuff used and vintage and other things, and it wasn't really what I wanted, wasn't what I was trying to find in that. And every guitarist is searching for inspiration. I call what I do tools of inspiration.
Totally. And also, to that point, Dave, I think, you and I both, know as players and collectors and everything, and you're a builder, but it's like we're always tone chasing. It's
yes,
like
it is a journey. It is not a destination.
You're always looking for the holy grail of sound at that moment that is in your head, which is it's the right ingredients, as you know, Dave. It's the right instrument, maybe the right pedal, and it has to be the right amplifier. And I was having a discussion a week or so ago, which you will appreciate, which as much as the modeling amps and everything else, have surged in popularity because it's easier, particularly, when people are plugging in, at churches and different setups and even major tours. But then people still want real tube amplifiers, particularly, in smaller venues. And when you record, and that's the sound in our head, and not knocking modeling and stuff like that, because I've certainly, tried out and used my share too, but you don't move air, like a speaker and an amplifier does to get that sound out of your head.
And that's true. I had somebody tell me one time years ago that when digital signal was coming out, that there was some type of Stanford study that was done on analog signal versus digital signal, and that they were processed by two totally different parts of the brain. That analog signal was processed by the part of your brain that does your emotions. And digital signal was processed by the part of your brain that does math problems.
Wow.
Which doesn't mean that it doesn't have its place, but it connected, it really resonated with me because I can play the modeling stuff, and man, some of it's really good. And then, most all the PAs these days are all digital.
Right.
And so, we live in a digital world, but in the world of inspiration for people to write stuff that can be very mediocre versus something that's super inspired, those analog tube tones will never be replaced.
I agree. It goes back to, I remember when the digital amps were really coming on hot and heavy back in the 80s and everything, as I'm sure you do, Dave, and where, the companies, bless their hearts, sold off, all of the molds for the tubes, because they're like going, guitarists are not going to want tube amps. Everything's going solid state and digital, blah, blah, blah. And then they sell off the molds to all these other countries. And then no guitarist stops playing tube amplifiers.
Right. No, I get it. And at one point in the 80s or early 90s, it was like groove tubes was the only game in town. It was literally the only thing.
I totally remember that. In fact, I've got some.
And then
groove
everything
started
popped up. Yeah. And then other brands started popping up. Thank God for Mike Matthews with Electro Harmonics and New Sensor, because he basically single-handedly took over 75% of the tube industry.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, with those
and you look at it too, because I remember, when the whole change was going on back then, Dave, to where it's like, those of us with tube amplifiers like you and myself, it's like we're trying to get some, new old stock and save it back. If you could find some RCAs and Sylvanias and GEs and everything, it's like going, I'm going to hold on to these because if my amp needs them, and it was,
you're hoarding.
I was hoarding. It was kind of a scary time in amplification because you didn't know if you were going to be able to find, a 12AX7 or a 12AY7 preamp tube, or even the rectifiers, particularly for a lot of the vintage amps, like you and I were talking, like my dad's 59 Bassman and some of these older Fenders, which you've worked on, older Fenders than that, but you got to have the tubes and you got to have, you have to have the parts, the transistors, the capacitors, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it has really come back. There are a lot of decent brands out there, which I will say, my caveat is no one brand works for every style of tube.
Right.
There are some tubes that are the strong points of a certain brand, and you have to weed through those and realize what works best and is more reliable, and how it sounds first and foremost. It's almost like reliability comes second, but it's a close second.
Right.
And then, then we had the COVID mess and all of that. And they said they were going to have a tube shortage with Ukraine and all of that stuff. And it was like, and then it didn't happen. It was just like almost artificial inflation.
Right.
But
also,
said,
during that time, during the pandemic, so many of us were, hunkered down in our homes and we're playing more guitar because you couldn't go out. There were no shows. There were no tours. Even churches had shut down, and to where, you were playing at home. And I mean, people were putting on at-home concerts, Dave.
They were. The live stream thing really started to take off at that point. I have a friend out of Georgia named Jason Woodward, he's going to be an Edwards artist, and he's a really great guy. But he has a TikTok channel that has millions of followers, and he gets on and he sings and plays. But he got to play live at one of the jams with Ron Miller on a Friday night. There was an all-star jam, and he just killed it. But he makes the majority of his income from live streams.
Right.
And it's insane that is, where we are, but it is definitely a reality.
And I've got to bring up also, you got to tell the story for the viewers and listeners for the show about the amp that's back behind you over your left shoulder, to where it's gotten a few 100,000 views also from a video this past year.
Yeah, so Music Is When Tyler Larson was at the Georgia Guitar Show in Atlanta, the Atlanta Guitar Show, and put on by my buddy Greg Henderson. And he was there doing videos, and I had this guy named Devin come up and say, I'd like to play one of your amps, can we do that? And I said, yeah, we can take it somewhere kind of out of the way. And he went over, and he had made a rapport and a contact with Tyler. And he says, hey, I'm going to go play this amp. You want to go? He's, this is a new thing. So that is actually kind of Vox, Marshall, and Supro all rolled into one. But I built the first one for a guy out of Georgia. Not going to mention any names, but it sounds like Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2 in a box when you crank it up.
So what's the name of that amplifier that Tyler used?
It's called the 6973.
Okay.
So Zeppelin formed in 69, and they were touring 1 and 2 into 73. And that being said, the output tubes in this are out of a Supro style amp that are 6973 output tubes. So it just seemed fitting.
Yeah.
But,
and it was so much fun too. I got to bring this up on your website, Dave, as I was going through it. And certainly I've played and looked at, and lusted for some of your amplifiers over the years. But it's interesting with the different names that you have. And I love it that you're wearing one of the T-shirts too, that, for the name of an amplifier that you do that can be done in 24 or 40 watts, but it's also a pedal. So talk about the elusive.
There is a very well-known legendary builder that I take a lot of inspiration from because of the way he did things. He built individual amps for people, and he sculpted their tones over the course of building, and they've become wildly popular. And very
expensive also.
And very expensive. And very hard to find, even if you have that kind of disposable income. But that being said, those tones you talk about the players that played them, every one of them is uniquely them, and that's kind of where my philosophy on building amps changed. But I went down this almost a 6-year rabbit hole on learning everything that I could learn about the different versions and the fine points.
Right.
And at some point I had somebody ask me to build them a low wattage version, and they were going to pay me to do it. And so I did. And after some tweaking and some major time of designing, I came up with this amp, and it was one of those things that you're like, when you hit the nail on the head,
right.
And it's unmistakable that you've hit the nail on the head.
Right.
You have to go, okay, that's the tone right there. But I had to chase it and really learn all the fine points. And I learned from so many different mentors. I asked so many questions. There were so many stories, so many schematics, so many different amps or clones out there. And I'm not a clone guy.
No,
I'm doing
and you
my own thing.
never have been, you know, and
No.
that's one of the things about your amplifiers from the first time I played through one, to where you were not trying to clone or copy anybody. But as you and I know also, Dave, in the world of amplifiers and pedals, you know, there are certainly the people that will, you know, to hide what they are, they will like put giant amounts of epoxy over everything, so that, you know, so even if you try and take it apart, you're going to destroy it, and you're not going to learn what the secret sauce was anyway.
That's right. So secret sauce, I had chased this tone for quite some period of time, and it had eluded me. And I came up with the name Elusive, and I'm like, yeah, that suits this amp. But it being the flagship, it takes about a 40-hour work week to wire one.
Wow. And I wanted to ask this too, Dave, because I know our listeners and viewers of the show are going to want to know too. Where do you get your cabs from and your heads and everything? You build it all?
We build them. Everything's in-house. I'm open architecture. So I have a shop that's about 25 yards from my house here on our farm. And it's all done there. All of the coverings, custom.
That's incredible that you're doing them all from scratch on that, to where,
Absolutely.
you know, and once again, you know, with the Elusive, you know, with the amplifier, and certainly, you know, in that 60s style kind of with the sound. But then what was the motivation, because you had never done it before, to create an Elusive pedal also?
So that being said, a lot of people were going to love this amp, and a lot of people want it, but there are not a ton of people out there that would pony up the money for one, because it is the flagship. Like I said, there are 9.
And what's the base price? What's the base price? You know, with the
a head is $3,500.
Yeah, for an Elusive.
And you know, then for an Elusive, and that's for a 40 water. It's a little less for a 24 water.
Well, I know there's also going through your amps, as I'm sure, you know, people that are going to go to your website will know also, Dave, to where and I think virtually almost all of the models, except for the little Tyke, you offer them in a head configuration with a cab or as a combo.
Absolutely. Pretty much any configuration, any available covering, any handle, any corner. So it's the
so they really are personal. They're a custom amplifier built for you.
Absolutely. And I build stock models of that to put out there for sale occasionally. But the majority of my business are people paying deposits and getting exactly what they want.
So if I wanted to go snakeskin 80s style, I could still do that.
Absolutely.
You know, I might have to do that.
Won't be the first one or the last one.
Nor will be the last one. But once again, I want to go back to the you know, the flagship amp. You know, with the different configurations. Why did you decide to do a pedal? Because this is like a whole new territory for you, Dave.
It was, and another education, which I've had some major help with. So that being said, there are a lot of pedals out there that have become mystical, and some of them have that are current builds have 5-year wait lists and kind of thing. And so I could get my hands on one to play, and when you hear something and there's all of this hype around it. And I'm not saying it's bad, but you look at something from your own standpoint and say, I could do that, and I can do my own thing.
Right.
But like totally not a clone, but I can do, I would do it differently. Let's just put it that way. And so I started messing around with that. And one of the reasons why is because a lot of people are not familiar with my brand, because I do such custom work.
Right.
And this is a way to introduce them to my brand and my quality and my mindset on how to do things, because
this is
very much
your
a
gear
perfectionist.
gateway drug, basically.
It
To
is
offer
a
them a
gateway
pedal,
drug.
it's like going, try out the pedal, and then come see my amplifiers.
Exactly. So over a course of 2-3 years, I really got into those circuits and decided on what we did. And I think the Elusive now pedal it's on version 4.2, so quite a few revisions.
And also I got to bring up too, Dave, to where, people that want an Elusive pedal have to go in and pre-order because you're constantly sold out.
I am totally sold out at the moment, and expanding. Did not anticipate, you do something that you think is good,
right?
How it's received and how players react to it and gravitate to it is totally not within your control, right?
It has to be great, though. It has to be gratifying, just like, with seeing your amplifier on videos and on stages and with bands and everything, but also to see, players using your Elusive pedal in the studio and on the road. That has to be
on their fly gigs.
Exactly. And that has to be because as you and I both know, you a lot of times you have to live, if you're doing a fly date, you have to live with the amplifier that's there. But
the backline,
if you can, with the backline, but then if you can capture your tone in your pedals, and you take that on the plane with you.
So anyway, I wanted to emulate the Elusive amp and the sides of the foot switch on the Elusive amp in a pedal, because it had hit a home run, and so there was a lot of tweaking and component changes and board revisions that went into it. But now I've got something. We just hit the version 4 threshold, and I took everything I had made to the Nashville show, and I had 2 pedals out, the Elusive, and I thought, well, I'll sell a few pedals, and the reaction to those 2 pedals by every player was outstanding. I was overwhelmed. Super humbled, and I sold out to the point of even selling the demo off my board on Sunday. Like they had.
But come on, Dave. That is the ultimate. To where it's like going, it's the end of the show. Come back at the end of the show. I'll sell you my demo.
I didn't even do that. Like I had sold out, and I thought, okay, that's a good weekend. You're not expecting anything more.
And you paid for the travel for the show.
It not only paid for the travel on the show, it's paid for some of the R&D and all of the stuff. It's coming back around now. So you throw the fleece out and you hope it comes back wet. But that being said, those 2 pedals have really hit the mark. And
so what is the separate pedal? Because I know the Elusive, but you cut out a little bit on
the separate pedal is called the Mystery Drive. And and it's kind of the Nashville pedal.
It seems like the Scooby-Doo pedal. It's like the mystery machine.
Actually, somewhat, but it is green, but has question marks on it, kind of like 1966 Riddler from Batman.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because I grew up, I loved Adam West and all of that. But so I started out with a certain circuit. And went through it to see and then started making changes to that circuit and augmenting that circuit to the point that it has turned into another circuit, but it still does what that other pedal will do, but it has more gain structure and it covers more ground. So there are guys taking that very expensive, well-known studio and Nashville pedal off of their boards and fly rigs, studio rigs, and they're putting and live rigs and putting those in place of that. And I've gotten nothing but like positive feedback from that pedal. So both of those pedals completely sold out at Nashville. And at the end of the show, I'd had about 3 hours sleep per night because I had to go to the shows and I had to go and do some demos with some people, which was late at night, and I had to eat sometime.
Right.
And so by Sunday night, I was just delirious, like barely coherent. And I was on my way home, and it hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have sold every one of those pedals. Now, I was excited about it, but just because one of my buddies that bought a pedal and was really super complimentary, he's one of the nation's leading luthiers, and he does vintage repairs and buys and sells vintage stuff. He is not even a pedal guy. He uses a Kemper, and he had to have that pedal, and he says, do you want to do a demo? And I'm delirious by this point, like I'm rambling. I said, well, yes,
at that point,
do.
it's a lack of no sleep and high sugar and everything, caffeine, and you're somewhere in between.
Absolutely. And just spacey. And he said, do you want to do a video? And I said, why, yes, I do. So I get my phone and I do that. And it sounded really good. And I put it on social media. And that video has gone crazy. And I'm getting private messages and emails from people all over the place saying how much, how long, and I'm putting them on a list. And this all happened. So I come
and that's from the Amigos Guitar Show in Nashville.
It is. That's from the Nashville show.
And then also one video and one musician, and it's like, and I guarantee you, when you started Edwards Amplification, you never dreamed you were even going to try and make pedals. It was all about amplifiers.
And honestly, if you'd told me 20, 25 years ago that I was going to be an amplifier builder for a living, I would have laughed you out of the room. It was just not, you know how it is.
And yet here we are.
That's not where you're focused. And
yet,
here we are. Now, I could have done something that probably made a whole lot more money, but a whole lot less satisfaction over those years.
But now what I was thinking though too, Dave, it's so funny because you've got the elusive amps and the elusive pedal. Now you're going to have to make the mystery amp to go along with the mystery pedal.
That very well may happen. I will not say yes.
I'm not just a pretty face, Dave. There's a brain in here.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And so that being said,
if the public
wheels
speaks,
are always turning.
If the public speaks, Dave,
you got to listen to the public. See, and here's the thing: without the players over the years and bought my silly prototype early versions and given me feedback and kept pouring into me and paying me. Well,
you and I were talking about that earlier too, Dave. And I don't, and some of our viewers and listeners for the Gear Gab may not realize this, but particularly, with small builders of amplifiers, pedals, guitars, basses, you name it, to where, when people are buying these instruments and tone machines and pedals and everything else, they're actually putting money back into the builders so that then they can continue to build new amps and new pedals and new guitars. And we were talking about Neville guitars and Whitfield guitars, people that you're friends with, but like yourself, to where then you're able to go back home and build new amplifiers and build new pedals that otherwise you couldn't afford to. If you were doing the daily grind and you were just kicking out, you had 3 amplifiers and you were putting them out in music stores, then that's that. But when they're buying from you as an in-house builder and creator and innovator, they're actually supporting the art of making this gear.
Yes. And there's a flip side to that I cannot go without mentioning. These players that have bought my stuff over the years and continue to buy my stuff, they're my source of inspiration. So if I had to stand over a bench soldering all day and building cabinets and doing Tolex, and there was not a passion behind it where I was inspired by these players to build for them, I would have hit a point of burnout years ago and given up, and it's so funny. It's like totally nothing happens by chance. You think, okay, this is probably the last one I'm ever going to do, and things are just like, it's ghost town. And
Right.
then all of a sudden, there comes this source of inspiration that just totally gives you a second wind.
Right.
And motivation and passion again to start doing it all over with. And I am lucky enough that the way my business model is, I deal directly with the players, right? So I get to speak with them on the phone, and they call me and email me and text me and tell me how much they appreciate what I'm doing, and how, and they're giving back. Right. Not only are they supporting me financially, and helping the business grow, but they're the source of inspiration. And
it reminds me too. It reminds me of, like, artists, just like Da Vinci and Michelangelo and everything back in the day, Dave, to where they had patrons, that supported them so that they could do the artwork. And it's the same, with building the amplifiers, to where, the clients and everything are telling you what they want. But then also in return, they are getting a custom amplifier that nobody else is going to have exactly that same amplifier. That's their custom for their sound in their head that they worked with you on, with the matching of the preamp tubes and the main drive tubes and the speaker and, transformer, everything. As you and I know, Dave, it's like all of those pieces interplay to be able to create the sound.
It's the sum of the parts.
It's some of the parts, just like you were talking about the cabinet. I mean, down to the Tolex.
It is.
And the wood.
It's everything. Everything has a specific reason to it. So now, so what I like to try to do with the clients is, if they are remotely local, unless they've heard an amp that I build in my line, I bring them into this room and I set up amps, and I watch them play, and they can bring their gear in and they can set it down, and I watch them and listen to them play, and I understand what they're doing, right? How they're playing. There are all these nuances. I mean, players can even be brighter and darker with their hands.
Oh, totally. And also, as you and I know, if they palm mute, or if they finger pick or thumb pick or flat pick, and and also
it's all of these fine nuances, and I have a decent ear. So I listen to that, and then I know what amp in my line they will gravitate towards, and I put them on that. And then from there, if I need to make a few minor changes, I do that. But then they get to choose the style, the look, and the configuration.
It's like you're doing the Manuel, like Manuel does with nudie suits. You're doing with amplifiers. People are coming in, and you're fitting them. And that has to be fun, though. It has to be fun for the musician, but also for you to get that personal interaction time to figure out what model. Because and I want you to talk about your other models you currently have, because I know you use that as like a starting point when you're working with people. But like on the King Richard and the Hot Mama and the Double D Tweed and the Little Type Tweed, how did you develop these individual ones? Did you base them around the power tubes, or what was the thought process?
Somewhat, and somewhat of the circuits, but there are more American instrument amp sounds, and there are more British amp sounds, and people will gravitate towards one or the other for certain reasons, unless they're running multi-amp rigs. But that being said, there are styles of players. And the idea is you're trying to play to every player's strong suits. You make a player sound better in what he does, the way he does it, and it inspires him night after night, player after player. And you figure out what the common denominators are, right? So, I have your EL84 amps, like the King Richard and the Hot Mama. And then I have the Princess and the Queen and the Double D and the Elusive, which are 6V6 based amps. And then, I have several others like the 6973 with the 6973 output tubes, which is definitely, it's its own thing. But that being said, people will try stuff they haven't tried before, and they may find their tone that they've been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's fun to watch the revelations, because you're like, just try this for a minute. And,
Mm-hmm.
they think there are a lot of players out there that, they've been a goose for so long, they don't realize they're a duck. And they keep trying.
You got to kind of open them up, right?
And they keep trying to be this goose because it's what they've always done,
right?
And then all of a sudden you put them in duck world and they go, oh my gosh, I'm a duck. and it's so fun to watch. But then they're like, that's it. What is that? Mm-hmm. And so when you see the looks on their faces and they gravitate towards it, and there's some players that it's absolutely no surprise what they're going to go towards, and we just work it out.
But also you and I know too, Dave, it's like, and I've had a few made for me over the years with custom instruments, guitars and such. And I've had some custom pedals done and a few custom amps, but there's just something about it to where when it is geared towards your sound and your playing style and everything else, that, I think it reinforces, like you said, to where, like with the elusive amp and the elusive pedal, to where it makes you more it makes you a better player, because that is the sound in your head. And then it inspires you.
Right. I heard something a long time ago from a very, very wise guitar player. And he says, you see that stage right there? And I said, yeah. He says, if you're not inspired on that stage, nobody out here is going to be.
Right.
Because you cannot fake it. Mm-mm. You cannot emulate it. It has to be authentic, because everybody out here knows what authentic is.
Right.
And so the idea is to get them a tool of inspiration that when they get on stage and they hit the first note, they say, okay, let's go. No matter how tired they are, and everybody has off nights. Every musician, I can tell you.
But also, don't you think though, same thing, Dave, to where, like we were talking about from the show, to where with the sound, with the amplifiers, people know authenticity, yes. and
absolutely.
And there's and you can probably explain it better than me, but there's a certain, to have the right amplifier and the right sound, coming from that when you're playing the instrument, there's that give and take. You know what I mean? It's like, that you have to have with both, they have to be intertwined. They have
to symbiotic relationship.
Thank you.
There's a connection there, and I've seen a lot of players on stage. Some of them with backline, some of them with their own rigs, and some of them that are searching because they haven't found it yet. And some guys have changed their mindset and they're starting all over on that journey, because it is cyclic.
Right.
But that being said, they haven't found that connection yet. Doesn't mean they don't sound good. Doesn't mean that their abilities aren't great. But when you take somebody that has got great skill and ability, and a good and just a natural talent,
right,
and you put them with the right, something happens.
Right. Yeah, with putting them with the right amplifier and with everything being symbiotic, tied together.
And it's an extension of them.
Right.
They're able to get their art and their heart and their soul out onto,
Yeah, and I think it, like we were talking about with pedals and amps and everything. I think something, like with just speaking for myself too, when I'm playing, I don't want to have to think about the gear. I don't want to have to. I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to think about it. I expect it to function properly, so that when whatever I'm doing musically, it is a conduit for me.
Right. And we live in a world of things that have become unserviceable, that I would consider to be impossible to work on, or just disposable merchandise.
Totally.
At this point.
Totally. I think there's so much throwaway gear, and I think that's what's great about like what you're doing, with the amps and pedals, is to where they are serviceable, they are upgradable. You can, as you and I know, just changing preamp tubes, to a different, brand, or the power tubes changes everything. Or changing the speaker. It's like, I don't know how many conversations. Yeah, to where even, if you start out with one speaker and go, I don't know about it, but you can voice an amp, as you know better than me, with a particular speaker.
Absolutely. I have a great relationship with a production manager, Dean Birdsong with WGS Speakers.
Oh yeah.
And he is a wizard, and he has not only helped me along my journey, but he has given me so many just unbelievable speakers that are insights and combinations that are just right. Like I can tell him what I'm looking for, and he can get me there, whether he's got to build it or it's something that's off the shelf that we can tweak, like in tighter criteria. So that's what we do. But he has been instrumental, and people are like, why don't you use other speaker brands? Because that's the best for that.
Well, and I think also it goes back to what you and I were talking about, earlier, Dave, which, loyalty, and just like, with a lot of the, guitar builders that you and I both know, and other pedal and amp builders in this business, there is a loyalty. And I think there, and I like that, to where, it's like, certainly companies that have worked with me over the years, I am more prone to work with them and use their gear. And so that, you want to help promote them. You want to be there, just as you have done, and just as players and everything have done with you. And just like WG, to where, those speakers, if you don't need to go anywhere else and you have a company with you that's helping you put the appropriate speaker with the appropriate amplifier and everything else you're doing, why go anywhere else?
Well, and that's the thing is, like, if there's something in that line that I can use, I'm going to use that. I go outside when there's not, right? And it doesn't make sense to build it if it's kind of a one-off or
and also if you have a customer requesting a particular speaker. If they go,
you have to go back and revoice.
That's what they do. That speaker. You've got to revoice the amplifier. You got to revoice the cab. You got to revoice everything because it all plays together.
People don't realize, like, just the elusive cab, it is tuned to a specific speaker, and it has a certain amount of airspace and a very, very specific port on it. For a reason. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I'm not saying that other speakers won't sound good in that cab, but when you bring everything together and all of the numbers in the data say it's together and your ears say it's together, then you've landed where you need to be. But that being said, there are a lot of good speaker brands out there, and some of them I use for very specific things. But like you said, it's all voicing, and there are certain relationships with the amp and the speaker that some amps and speakers just don't have a good relationship.
I agree.
They don't need to work. They don't need to work.
And you
together.
can tell it. You can tell it. Even some of the manufactured models, that come in to where it's like just changing out a speaker can make a world of difference, and people don't realize that.
It is a huge deal. And so, what I try to do is bring the whole package together and take a lot of the guesswork out for those specific sounds.
Right. That makes sense though. But also, I mean, I got to ask you this, Dave, for people, who are watching or listening to the show, with your amps that you have, that you currently offer on the website, and when people reach out to you, and we'll talk about social media and all that, but is it almost like a Ruth Chris to where they can go, here's what I think I'm looking for tube wise, here's what I'm looking for speaker size? I mean, how do you go about that, if they can't come into your studio there?
Well, I speak with them a lot, and I get as much background as I can, and their preferences, and there's a lot of communication. I spend a lot of time on the phone. I've worn out some AirPods, for sure. Because I have to keep my hands free. You know, I can't do this all day.
Yeah, because somebody's got to solder.
And
those cabinets won't make themselves.
No, they don't. They don't. I got to make some sawdust some days.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, a lot of times they call me and say, "Hey, I've heard this video on this amp, and I'm very interested in this amp," and I can get some background from them, and I can make it what they want. And then that being said, if they get it and they need some tweaking, then we figure it out and work it out. And I try to make things as tweakable as I can get them. But that being said, there are tricks, you know. A lot of guys, and you know, I find this to be funny in the day and age of so much technology, but a lot of guys and girls that are players, they think that if the numbers on the dials are not, the knobs are not at a certain place, that it's not going to sound right. and I encourage them. I'm like, listen, have you twisted knobs on this thing yet?
Right.
And you know, and eventually, you know, that it's a mindset change. Some people are like less resistant. There are guys that play with their guitars on 10 or very specifically on 8. You know,
a lot of the old blues players
never go up and down.
Yeah, a lot of the old blues players just turned everything wide open. And then they would turn the amplifier away from them and mic it, but everything was wide open. And that's the way they want it.
There are the guys that you see all night that are nuancing it. And they've got that palm on that volume knob and the tone knob, and they know exactly where they're going because they know their instrument so well, that individual instrument, you know.
Well, and also, like Dave, you and I know the same thing too, to where there is always a sweet spot. You know, there is a sweet spot with an amplifier.
The Holy Land.
Holy Land. It's like, and once again, you can't explain this, but it's like when you hit the zone, you know, and it's like going, you know, when you're playing, you know, your instrument, as you know, guys and gals do, to where it's like you hit the zone and it's like going, oh my gosh, it's like tonal nirvana. Yeah.
So the telltale sign when you're on stage, when that happens, is the quote unquote stank eye from all the other players. Like you get the nod and the eyebrow from them, you know, and the puckered lips are like, yeah.
But that's the goal.
All of those guys work. Yeah. When all of that comes together on a stage, and everybody around you is nodding and smiling and can't get the smile off their face, and everyone in the audience is totally connected, you know you're there.
You've hit it.
You know you're there.
Well, and I want to make sure also with, you know, for people that are watching and listening to the show, Dave, with Edwards Amplification, it's like if they're interested in ordering an amplifier or ordering a pedal, what is their best way to do it? I mean, what do you recommend?
So right now, while the website's going to be upgraded because we're just changing hosting services, it's there, but it's kind of like the store's broken right now. They can reach out to me on email, dave@edwardsamps.com, and they can reach out to me through DM on social media. I'm Edwards_amps on Instagram and David Edwards on Facebook with amps as my picture. So it's pretty unmistakable, and you send me a message, reach out to me, and then we'll connect, and I'll help you out any way I can.
Well, and I got to ask you, I don't want to put you on the spot, Dave, but when, you know, how far out are you back ordered on pedals? And if someone ordered an amplifier today, what's your turnaround time? Can you give me both those?
Yep. So right now, amps are about 3 months out, which is not bad because I work. It's what I do most all the time.
Yeah.
I tell
Except
everybody
now, when you're being interviewed.
Yeah. But pedals, I have sold out of the next run of elusive pedals. I have already reordered enclosures and boards because I did not anticipate that this next run from after the Dallas show is going to sell out. Right. So I have some people in line, but most of those people that are in line are on this next run. but it's sold out. And then I've got a few others after that. So, you're talking less than a month for a pedal. Right. And I would say a month on the outside. That depends on customs and all of that.
And you've got videos and everything up with the demos. I also wanted to bring up, Dave, we were talking before we started doing the show today, that you're going to be involved in another big guitar show that you're actually partnering up for coming up in February.
Yep. So I'm a promoter. So Huntsville, Alabama, we're having a big guitar show. I think it's 12,500 square feet, the venue. Wow. In the first weekend in February of 2027, and it is called the RocketCityGuitarShow.com, and that's the website, and that is up right now, and it's going to be a great show. People are coming from all over the U.S. to do this show.
Wow!
It'll be a great thing. So it's buy, sell, trade, vintage, boutique, new, used, the whole 9 yards.
Everything we love.
Yeah, everything we love. And so we're doing that the first weekend in February of 2027.
That's amazing. So, well, I got to tell you, Dave, congratulations with the amplifiers, with the pedals. It's amazing when these great things happen with the elusive pedals and with everything else that you've accomplished, and the amplifiers that you have really honed these down to become incredible tone tools. I certainly hope that everybody watching or listening to the show for Gear Gab will go to the website. There's going to be a new website up for Edwards Amplification to be able to check out all the amplifiers, the pedals, the t-shirts, and also some more videos and all the great stuff that Dave Edwards is doing. Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show, and congratulations, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining the Gear Gab Podcast with Eric Dahl. Subscribe to our weekly conversations on your favorite platform. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Gear Gab Podcast. You'll never know who our next guests will be.